And as you said, outside Maharashtra, here he's a iconic, almost worshipped like God, or also the other way. But outside Maharashtra, those who don't know, they must be wondering what is all this fuss about? Who is this man? And it was so sad that the last biography of Savarkar was written when he was alive in the 1960s by Dhananjay Keer, in English. I'm talking about a comprehensive biography. And since then, till the time my book, the first one, came out in 2019, so many biographies have been written on Gandhi and Nehru and so many other leaders, as it should be. Every generation needs to revisit the past and understand, reevaluate them. But somehow Savarkar escaped evaluation even by the political, parties and wings which sought to espouse him, which is the sad part. I think the left and the right both kind of pick and choose what they want about him, which suited their convenience. And that we must be very clear about. Nobody has been fair to him on either side of the political spectrum. And being in the center of both of that, and as an apolitical person, and I thought it was my duty. There's this beautiful quote of Toni Morrison, American writer, who says, if there is a book that you want to read and it hasn't been written yet, you must be the first one to write it. So I thought, okay, let me put this together, and there was so much material which was dying to be told across archives in India and also outside India in the British Library, of almost 40,000 pages of documents that I managed to gather in about 2-3 weeks of staying in London, then Paris and Germany, the entire stay that he had in London, very stormy years that he had there. All of that was there. The Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, where I was given a fellowship to do research on Savarkar, and that too was an irony of sorts. For a person to get a fellowship at Nehru Memorial, at Teen Murthy, to do research on Savarkar. You have the entire Savarkar private papers running to about 26 microfilms. All the papers which went in and out of his house, letters, they were all intercepted. He was probably the only leader who was kept under surveillance both before and after independence. So you had all these records there. But when I went to the accession register, I think the last time it was referenced was sometime in 1972, 73. So people were making all kinds of allegations and claims about the man without having information.
Allegations and
counter allegations. And my plea always is, it's not my case to say, we all must become Savarkar Bhakts or anything like that. But even if you want to hate the person, love him or hate him, but let your love or hatred be informed. Let it not be based on rhetoric. He was someone who was so logical in his arguments, logical in his thinking. So even if you hate him, base it on actual facts. Don't throw allegations in the air which have no substantiation.
Thanks for summarizing this so well. Again, the monumental research that you have done and the amount of references that you have provided in your books is just mind-boggling. The amount of information you are able to access. Let's come back right to where we are at right now. So we are sitting here in one of the great institutions of this country, and this institution has given a lot of grades to the country. But let's talk about two of them right now. Obviously, the first one being one of the founders, Lokman Nekada, and the second one being Swatantraveer Savarkar, whose room is right here. And in case you didn't know this, every year on his birth and death anniversary, that room is open for general public, so you can come in and see it for yourself if you haven't seen it already. So that aside, Vikram, since there are a lot of different things we covered, but time is short, let's talk about Savarkar here at Ferguson. He came here, I think, in 1902, 1903. And how was his student life? Of course, he led this famous protest about a kilometer from here near Lakhipool, and then he had trouble with the principal, who happens to share the last name with me. Of course, he was a great man in mathematics, but on this he was on the wrong side, I would say. But that
Pune and exposure here brought him literally to the highway of nationalism in numerous ways. Because by then Pune had already, we're talking of Pune in the beginning of the 20th century, you had already one stream of thinkers and the moderate faction, so to say, of the Congress, whether it was Mahadev Govind Ranade, Justice Ranade, or Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Vishnu Shastri Chiplunker, several others, and
In fact, both streams were very much here at one point of time.
the extremist and the moderate and the revolutionary stream, which was more importantly what was here, whether it was Vasudev Balkan Phadke or of course the Chafekar brothers who killed Charles Rand and Ives here to protest against the plague. And that was what had inspired young Savarkar, who was 12 or 13, to take an oath in front of his Ashtabhuja Bhavani family deity that he would fight till the very end for the liberation of the country. And so coming here was literally meeting all his heroes. Tilak by then had been released from jail, which he was booked for sedition after the Chapekars were executed. 124A put on him. And then, of course, you had another namesake of yours, S.M. Paranjpe of Card News magazine.
He was a Garam Dalma, very.
Yes. So both of these people were his, Prerana Swarups, and so he worked with them. And the second generation of that, for instance, Paranjpe's son Sri Krishna Paranjpe and Tilak's son Vishwanath Tilak, they were all almost of the same age. So they began to form the group of Mitra Mela still in Ferguson College. And in the Deccan College, where Savarkar also did, in addition, LLB classes, there also a group of Mitra Mela started emerging, and that's where, among others, you also had Senapati Bapat, who was also part of that group. And what would this do? They would, and Savarkar was known to produce a copious amount of literature, and all of that. And in a book festival, it really warms our heart to talk about his literary genius at such a young age. He was already a budding, very prolific poet by the time he came here. This was a place where he wrote his iconic poem Jayos Today, Shri Mahan Mangale Shivaspade Shubhade. He also composed the first Aarti for Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj right here. And somebody who also got interested in history and music of the Povadas. The historical ballads on Tanaji and Bajirao Prabhu and others that he wrote here. In fact, his speech in Ferguson on the centenary of Nana Fadnavis, the birth centenary, he spoke about the importance of historical characters to create national awakening. And a very interesting article that he wrote for the Aryan Weekly, which used to come from Ferguson College, was called Saptapadi. The 7 steps to national regeneration. And his poetry also flourished here. He wrote about Vidori marriage, Vidvanche Dukha, which won the best poetry prize also. And he read voraciously, as he always did, right from the Sanskrit, Kalidasa and Bhavabhuti's plays to Homer and Shakespeare and Milton's Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained were his favorites. He in fact wrote an entire essay of Ramayana and the Iliad while he was the student here, comparing the two epics. And again, his fiery speeches that he gave. So his blooming ground as a poet, as also a political thinker and ideologue, because he was deeply influenced by Herbert and Mill and Herbert Spencer, the utilitarian theory, which remained with him all through his life. What is the use of everything? Later on, he was even going to say the cow is just a useful animal. So utilitarianism about everything was also the seeding ground was this, and he used to give these fiery speeches here. In one of the speeches given, perhaps here in one of the grounds in Ferguson College where we are sitting, the famous historian V.K. Rajwade presided over, and he spoke about the history of Italy and the Italian revolutionaries. And after that, Rajwade is supposed to have come and said that, this young man speaks very well, but please don't talk in open about all this, because not only you will all fall into trouble with sedition cases slapped against us. And in fact, another professor of Ferguson, I think C.G. Bhan, after one of his speeches, he said, this person is very devious, he speaks very well, but then, he's literally the devil. He should not be taken too seriously by the young men. They will, be misled by him. So I think he was feared also by, including the professors. And the turning point came in 1905 when Lord Curzon decided to partition Bengal. And look at how our history books also talk of the revolutionary movement. It is almost spoken in a post, script in a long essay. The mainstay is the non-violent movement. Somewhere footnote is about, isolated incidents of bravery of some misguided young men who threw a bomb here and there and were executed and so on. But Savarkar's life shows that not only he but his elder brother Baba Rao, they constantly connected with the Bengal revolutionaries, Anushilan Samiti, Sri Aurobindo, Prafulla Chaki, Khudiram Bose and all of them, and constantly the two factions would meet between Maharashtra and Bengal. And Bengal was being partitioned, and the first protest for that happened in Maharashtra, in Pune, as I said, a kilometer away, where in the Sarvajanik Sabha it was first decided that we should organize a big bonfire of foreign clothes, and N.C. Kelkar, I think one of his great grandson is also here, N.C. Kelkar and S.N. Paranjpe were in the meeting, and they said, let's not burn foreign clothes, let's collect it and give it to the poor. Savarkar, who protested saying this is not foreign clothes, it's actually the essence of foreign rule. And so cartloads of all of this was collected and burnt at Lakdipur, and for which he was not only the first person to organize the first secret society in India, but also the first one to organize a student protest and a bonfire, and also the first student to pay a price for it in India. He was made to pay a fine of 10 rupees by Wrangler Paranjpe, who was the principal, Raghunath Paranjpe, who was an Anglophile, did not like the revolutionaries too much, and he was rusticated from college, so he also paid a price for that. So these 3-4 years that he was there here was a personal growth era for him as a poet, as a revolutionary, as an amateur historian, as a journalist, a writer, and a political ideologue and organizer. And this paved the way for his ascent to London, where on the invitation of Shyamji Krishna Verma, he goes there on a fellowship with Tilak's recommendation.
That's the next interesting chapter. But let me pause here for a minute. In the formative years here, you talked about so many different questions for you, but if you can't answer it, I don't think anyone can. Which of these facets you think, if you had to pick one, would really define him as a person?
No, I think that would be so unfair to him. A man of so many parts and being equally, jack of all trades and master of all also. Yeah. I think it's very tough to say he was this better than the other.
No, I know you would say that, but I think we'll come to this part a little later. But let's continue with this to his really next set of formative days in London, right? And of course, Shyamji Krishna Verma played an important role in him being there, and the recommendation from here. And of course, some of his classmates, as you said, or batchmates like Senapati Bapat, were also with him. So how did the London years prepare him for what was next?
My God, I think those were the stormy years, as most of you know, the 5 years that he went ostensibly to study law at the Grey Ring, but this was to organize the revolutionary movement sitting outside India, because sitting within India, the sedition laws were so strong that they would be applied on anyone, but there he would be anti-government and that was still allowed. So that is why most of them, Madam Bhikaji Kama, Shyamji Krishna Verma, several of them moved outside London, Paris. These became the epicenters of the revolution. Before, of course, the Ghadar party, the Ghadar movement took over, which again took it all the way to Canada, to US, and so on. So a lot of the Indian freedom movement happening outside the shores of India itself is a very interesting phenomenon. And in London, in those 5 years in the India House, he was literally the young leader who led the revolution. And lots of things that happened there, and almost a microcosm of India. People from every part of India. There was, of course, Shyamji as a senior person, but you had Lala Hardayal, who later formed another party. You had MPT Acharya, BVS Iyer, again a very close associate of Savarkar, Sikandar Khan, who later, of course, went off to the Muslim League. So several people like this, Niranjan Pal, Bipin Chakrapal's son, and of course Madan Lal Dhingra, the famous revolutionary who got executed there. All of these people coming together for a common cause, and Savarkar was the intellectual,
he was like a magnet who get all these people. He was a short-stated person, but his voice and his intellectual pride somehow managed to get all these people rallied around him.
And literally being mightier than the sword, and and in a book festival to talk about the pen actually being mightier for a colonial government. I think that is very heartwarming because here again, I mean, what I mentioned earlier, that the revolution that happened was not something that were isolated incidents. These needed a certain amount of strategy, a certain amount of planning, and he used this. So, and this book then became the Bhagavad Gita for revolutionaries for generations to come. Bhagat Singh is supposed to have got the second edition of this published, and he almost made this and the life of Barrister Savarkar by Chitragupta, the pseudonym, which is not Savarkar, by the way, as is normally alleged. This became the entry criteria for revolutionaries to enter HSRA. And years later, 2 decades after it came out, copies of it translated into Tamil and Japanese and various languages were found in the INA raids because Rashtrihari Bose and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose were getting this translated. So such an important intellectual corpus that was given for the revolutionary movement. He also translated Mazini's biography into Marathi and the bomb manuals. The bomb manuals which were there, and there is such an interesting story about that too, like how Senapati Bapat from the Maharashtrian side, and you had Hemchandra Das Kanungo from the Bengali Anushilan Samiti. They are sent to find out this bomb manual, and that time the bombs could not be manufactured. So they go all the way, and no one could believe that they found it with a Russian tailor, the manual, and they took it and then they see it ki, Arey Baba, ye to kala akshar hai, we can't understand anything, it's all in Russian. About 70 pages, and Hemchandra had taken photographs. And then they tried their best to get it translated, and one source says that Senapati Bapat had a German girlfriend, Amaya Cloth or something. So I think these people also had colorful lives. They didn't just do revolution, and there were other things also that went on. Even Madanlal Dhingra is supposed to have had very colorful life before he got into this whole obsession. And this girlfriend took 6 months to translate it, and then it was translated into various Indian languages, and that copy was found with it also was found with the Khudiram Bose and all of them in the Alipur bomb case, and it was found in the Nashik conspiracy case where Anant Lakshman Kangere assassinated Jackson. And that was how they zeroed in and said, okay, this man who is this tiny, diminutive, as you said, very nerdy looking person who didn't look like he would even kill a fly, was the man who was the brain behind all of this, and that is how the witch hunt began to get him back to India. So those 5 years, I think, were very, very crucial for the revolutionary movement gaining ground.
I think if we keep discussing this biography chronologically, we will probably need 3-4 hours. So now I'm going to go to some more specific, shorter questions. One of the requests that has come in is if you can answer 1 or 2 answers in Hindi as well. But you pick whichever one. So let's say 2 or 3 shorter questions. I think one of the things that I personally found extremely moving in your book is the way you have described that day, 10th of December, right, 1910, when you wrote Sagara Prana Karmara sitting at the Brighton beach. And I want you to briefly describe that, because the description which comes from what was written by Niranjan Pal, I think that is the source for it. It's just amazing. If you haven't read that, just that those 4 pages of Vikram's book, I would think everyone should read. So I want you to briefly touch upon that, and then we'll move to the next era of his life.
So I think by then, Madanlal Dhingra had assassinated Jackson. The whole revolutionary movement in London, which had been built with so much of care, had unraveled itself. India House was captured, and all the revolutionaries had scattered away to different parts of the world. Some back to India, some to Canada, America, and so on. And that is when Savarkar and Niranjan Pal go to Brighton to enjoy a vacation. And that's where he's sitting, and then he's seeing all these families enjoying the vacation with their children. And Niranjan Pal writes that almost spontaneously he started sobbing, and extempore these verses came out of his mouth. Well, I don't need to translate that to a Maharashtrian audience, but it was literally addressing the ocean, saying, you promised me, you cheated me, you said you're going to come all the way here to give me education. What use is this education if my mother back home is in chains?
And Sagara Prana Karmara, Joyo Sutre are amongst some of the greatest poems in the Marathi language, Anani and Antony, in the last 100 years. I think let's move on a little bit forward. A lot of discussion has happened, and you have talked about a lot about the Andaman here. So we'll probably skip that a little bit. I'm sure there will be some questions. We'll pick up on that. But there's one aspect of Savarkar's life that is not talked about a whole lot, and that life, that era particularly came into force after his release from Andaman when he was in Ratnagiri under British sort of restrictions. Can you talk about Savarkar, the social reformer?
I think that is a highly underrated aspect of his life, and I must underline and say here that those people who allege that Hindutva is a Manuvadi and a casteist ideology, they just don't understand the philosophy itself. That dividing Hindu society into castes which were already existing was detrimental to the cause of Hindutva. So Hindutva by its very nature, and that continued even when the RSS took over. You had Guruji Golwalkar and the VHP and all of them in the 1964 when VHP came into existence. All Hindus are Sahodara, na Hindu Patito Bhavet. That was the unifying factor, because unless the Hindu society got together and organized, Sangathan as it was called, then they could not be a political unit and they could not stand up to political Islam, which was raging its waves in India at that time. So fundamentally, Hindutva has and has always been an anti-caste and a unifying force. And Savarkar, being the proponent of it, when he wrote his slim book of Essentials of Hindutva, sitting in the prison in 1923, almost as an answer to Gandhi's Khilafat movement and the appeasement of pan-Islamic tendencies that was happening, was precisely doing this about the 7 shackles that held Hindu society: Vyavasaya Bandi, Roti Bandi, Beti Bandi, Samudra Bandi, Sparsha Bandi. All these things that were spoken about brought people together. So the first inter-caste dining cafe in Ratnagiri, at a time when among the Maharashtrian Brahmins, the Chitpavans and the Deshastas would not sit together and eat, to have people of all communities sit together and eat. An Asprishya Ganpati, where the lowest in the so-called lowest in the caste order would be the Purohit, and everyone had to take his blessings. For the first time, people of all children of all castes studying in the same classroom. Untouchability striven to be eradicated from school classrooms, and Patit Pavan Mandir, of course, where people of all castes could go and worship, because I think he tried his best to get temple entry. He supported the Mahat Satyagraha that Dr. Ambedkar launched. Even the Nashik Kalaram Mandir, he tried his best to get entry, but when that failed, he said, we'll start a new Mandir of our own where everyone can go. So all these experiments, I think that's why even Ambedkar writes to him very glowingly that you are the only one who has understood how the caste system can be eradicated. And some of the experiments are really praiseworthy, but somehow he was always scared of even sharing stage with him till the time he was fully released with all the strictures taken away. But there were several invitations to him to come, and Savarkar himself said, look, I have restrictions of being in Ratnagiri only and not involved in politics, but you have a larger mandate. You can scale this up across India, and two of us, if we join hands, untouchability and caste and all of this can be eradicated in the next 10-15 years. But somehow the twain did not meet at that time.
But at that same time, during that period, 1929, Mahatma Gandhi also came down to Ratnagiri and met, and that interaction did go very, very well.
I think their interaction never went on well. And the two men met 2 or 3 times. The first one is always, suspect whether it really happened, but the first one was when they met as young men in London, and Gandhi had come from South Africa, and he sees this Chitpavan Brahmin in the kitchen cooking prawns, and Gandhi, he offers these prawns to Gandhi, and he says, no, I am a vegetarian, and he says, this is only boiled fish. If you cannot eat this, we want young men who can bite the fish alive. How can we work together if we do not eat together? So the first meeting was itself a very bad start. The second one was more important, where I think in 1908 or 1909, during the Dashera festivities, the India House there to have all these speeches. And Gandhi also was there, and he was a very shy person on stage, and he said, I'm not going to talk about politics, I'm going to talk about Ram Rajya and the establishment of Ram Rajya, and how non-violence is the important tenet. Immediately after that, he comes and rebuts him and says, we are talking this during the Dashera, where on the 9 days the Devi picks up weapons to kill the Asuras. And Ram Rajya was also established when Rama went and killed Ravan. He didn't go and sit in Satyagraha in front of him saying, please let Sita out. So to annihilate evil, violence, the Bhagavad Gita also says if adharma is there on the other side, that person could be your father, cousin, guru, anybody. It's your dharmic duty to kill that person. So if you consider the British Raj as adharmic, everything is legitimate. The means don't matter, the end matters, and that's where I think the two fundamentally differed. And later, of course, Gandhi, what Savarkar alleged as his appeasement of the Muslim community in the outbreak of the Khilafat, and also his opposition to these caste experiments. Gandhi actually said, I do not consider the Varna system as being odious, it is so important for Hinduism. He was only bothered about untouchability, and that's why the Harijan movement said eating together and all is like a very, it's almost like easing yourself, it's as dirty thing that eating together, that cannot bring any bonds of unity between people. And so they had fundamental differences there. The Shuddhi movement that the Arya Samaj and the Hindu Mahasabhas were doing of reconverting, and that also had its traces to the Port Blair experience, where many of the prisoners, they happily got converted to Islam just to avoid the punishment that they got there. But there was no way to bring them back to the Hindu fold because we are not a proselytizing state. So using the Arya Samaj principles of put a little bit of tirtha with and so on, and get them back into it. So Shuddhi movement was also something that Gandhi and also the Ali brothers, Shaukat Ali and Muhammad Ali, did not like, and there was constant fights. So I think ideologically, and today even in Parliament, the way their portraits hang diametrically opposite to each other. Of course, I don't credit our politicians with any that kind of intelligence that they thought so much that is why we need to put it perpendicular. It just happens so. But it is true that
ideological on most issues.
And that is where I think the ism goes on till today, that there is not one the idea of India. But there are, and in a country like India, there can't be a unitariness about anything. There has to be multiple ideas, and Savarkar's idea was another idea whose time has now come, and it was opposed to the Gandhian, Nehruvian ideas of India, which ruled roost for several decades after freedom.
And I think one of the things that you mentioned and talked about in your second volume is in the 1950s, since you mentioned the idea of India, Savarkar in the 1950s in the independent India goes to great length to talk about the book, but if you haven't, of course read the book, but on Savarkar.org website, the audio recording of that famous 1956 speech by Vikram Savarkar here in Pune, I think it was at the ST College ground, is here, which was commemorating the 100th birth anniversary of Lokmanya Tilak. And that speech is amazing. The amount of things it talks about his foreign policy, about defense policy in that.
Yes.
I think we can go for
2-3 years before that, in 1952, when he disbanded, again in Pune, when he disbanded the Abhinav Bharat, which was formed here, he said now it is, and those of critics who make this comparison that today terrorism, Naxalism are all, they are also revolutionaries, they also picked up the gun. So he says, now that we have freedom and we don't have an outsider who's colonizing it, it's not the bullet but the ballot that must help us to overthrow regimes. So today the utility of this Abhinav Bharat is gone and it should be dissolved. And most prominently on the backdrop there was Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's picture. And he said we got our freedom, and that's what Ambedkar said repeatedly, that India got her freedom mainly because of the heroics of the Indian National Army and of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and not as much as देवी हमें आजादी बिना खड़े के बिना ढाल साबरमती के संत को लेकर गया कमाल. That is an overstretching and simplification of the historic truth, and मुझे लगता है उसी कारण बहुत सारे जो क्रांतिकारी लोग हैं उनका जो योगदान है उसको पूरी तरह से गौण कर देते हैं हम लोग, और उसके बारे में हम पूरी मेहनत नहीं देते, जो बहुत ही दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण है.
I think this part, one of the things
I remembered your
even I remembered. I think one of the things that he did extensively in the 1950s, I remember reading, is extensively urged youth to join the army. I mean, that was his answer. It was not to have an internal organization, rather have army as the organization of the country to defend the country.
I think that the Sainikikaran mandals that Hindu Mahasabha did, I mean, it was not only after independence, before also, and that also is twisted by critics today. That when Netaji was fighting the British, he was enlisting people for the army, British army, which is a fallacy. I mean, even Ambedkar in Pakistan and Thoughts on Partition says that it's alarming that almost 60% of the British Indian Army, the communal composition is Pathan and the Northwest. And Ambedkar writes that, suppose there is an invasion from Afghanistan, will those soldiers stand by their co-religionists or will they stand for this country? So the Hindus need to look at this with alarm. And that was what the Hindu Mahasabha was doing, that increase the numbers, so that because the Rowlatt Act and so on did not let us use weapons. So get trained in the army, and also in the eventuality of a civil war, when the two communities would clash, when the British would leave, one side is fully militarily trained, the other one is fully pusillanimous, speaking of non-violence. So that way you need to be armed yourself for self-defense, not proactive violence. And also a lot of these soldiers then crossed over to the INA and provided a feeder circuit to the INA army as well. So that allegation also that he was partnering with them and all that is just doesn't understand the strategic thinking behind it.
Vikram, we have 5 more minutes and then I'm going to take some questions. I've only got a couple of audience questions here. But one question that we are not going to talk about is the mercy question, because he has answered it 1,000 times. So even if that question comes from the audience, I'm not going to take it, because I think that's done and dusted. Just Google for his answers anywhere on YouTube and you'll find it. Right. But one question I'm going to ask you, which is again more relevant to where we are at, is and really we need to thank you that you took so much effort to write about it. Is not related to Savarkar, but that era is what happened in Maharashtra in February of 1948. And that's a dark era of Maharashtra history that was not talked about and was brushed under the carpet for various reasons. So first of all, thank you very much for bringing it up, and I definitely want to hear from you, all of us, for 5 minutes, your research, how you spoke with some of the people, survivors from that era.
Just this morning I was talking to the Raja Sahib Patvardhan, and they were telling me about the Sangli and the entire Patvardhan states which bore the brunt two of these. ठीक है, तो it's not my first language of comfort, so I will try my best. तो वो सारे जो स्टेट्स में और फिर बॉम्बे प्रेसिडेंसी में भी जिस तरह के राइट्स हुए, हम 1984 के बारे में तो सब जानते हैं, एंटी सिख राइट्स जो हुए, पर 1948 में क्योंकि नाथुराम गोडसे और नारायण आप्टे महाराष्ट्रियन ब्राह्मण्स थे, इसीलिए पहले तो सारे लोग जिनका सरनेम गोडसे था उनको पकड़ के जिंदा जला दिया गया था, और फिर चित्पावन ब्राह्मणों को पकड़ के उनको मारा गया था, और फिर देशस्थ ब्राह्मणों को, और एथनिक क्लेंजिंग जिस तरह से कश्मीरी पंडितों को विस्थापित कर दिया कश्मीर के घाटी से, उसी तरह से पूरे सांगली, कोल्हापुर, उस पूरे जगह से सारे ब्राह्मण परिवार या तो मुंबई या पुणे या फिर मैसूर स्टेट ऐसे उनको माइग्रेट करना पड़ा। तो और न एक एफआईआर इसमें दर्ज हुआ, न उसमें कोई जांच कमेटी बिठाई गई, उसका मानिए कि इतिहास के पन्नों से पूरी तरह से उसको ऐसे हुआ ही नहीं। आज अगर कोई बोले ये प्रोपेगेंडा है, व्हाट्सएप हिस्ट्री है, ये सब लोग बोलते हैं, तो मुझे, क्योंकि मैंने पहले ही कहा था कि मेरे खुद के परिवार के कुछ लोग थे जो इससे प्रभावित हुए थे, तो इसीलिए मुझे पता था कि ये हुआ। पर इसमें दस्तावेज बहुत कम है। मॉरी पैटरसन उन्होंने कुछ फॉरेनर आके इस पर संशोधन करते हैं और हमारे लोग इस पर कोई दिलचस्पी नहीं दिखाते। तो उन्होंने कुछ लिखा था कि जस्टिस कोआजी कमीशन एक हुआ था कोल्हापुर के महाराजा के गाइडेंस में, परंतु बाद में मैंने सोचा कि अभी इंफॉर्मेशन एक्सेस इतना आसानी से होता है, तो सोशल मीडिया से क्राउड फंडिंग करेंगे इंफॉर्मेशन को। तो मैंने वही पूछा सवाल कि आपके परिवार के जो स्टोरीज हैं, ओरल हिस्ट्रीज, तो जहाँ डॉक्यूमेंटेड हिस्ट्री हमें मदद नहीं करती, वहाँ ओरल हिस्ट्री काम में आती है। तो ओरल हिस्ट्रीज क्या है आपके परिवार में? बहुत सारे लोग, हजारों के तादाद में लोग मुझे अपने एक्सपीरियंसेस बताए कि मेरे दादाजी के साथ ये हुआ, मेरे अंकल के साथ ये हुआ, मेरे साथ ये एक दो तो 90-91 साल के लोग थे जो सौभाग्यवशात अभी जिंदा थे, तो उनसे मुझे बात करने का मौका मिला और आई विटनेस अकाउंट कि किस तरह से उनके घर जला दिए गए, किस तरह के खेत और खलिहान सब नष्ट कर दिए गए। और मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंटली जब मैंने उनसे पूछा, द फर्स्ट ethics of research is you need to ask clearance from the जिससे आप इंटरव्यू कर रहे हैं, क्या हम इसको छाप सकते हैं, तो क्या आपका परमिशन है कि मैं इसको अपनी किताब में डालूं, तो 90% ने बोला नहीं, इसके बारे में बात प्लीज मत कीजिए, हम इंफॉर्मेशन देंगे पर इसको आप एनोनिमस रूप से डालिए। क्यों? आपका सत्य है, आपके परिवार का सत्य है, इसको डालने में आपको क्यों इतना डर लगता है? तो उन्होंने वही बोला कि हम वी मूव ऑन फ्रॉम इट, बहुत सारे साल हो गए हैं, हमने अपनी जिंदगियों को फिर से रीएस्टैब्लिश किया और आज महाराष्ट्र के राजनीति में जो लोग हैं उनके परिवारों का, मैं किसी का नाम नहीं लेता पर पब्लिक है, सब जानती है, जो राइट्स लीड कर रहे थे उनके परिवार के ही लोग थे, वो नेता थे, तो आज वो पॉलिटिकल पावर में हैं। तो टुडे वी डोंट वांट टू एंडेंजर अवर लाइफ, तो हम आपको इंफॉर्मेशन देंगे पर इसको आप हमारे नाम से मत डालिए। तो आप सोचिए अमित जी कि कितने साल बाद, दशकों बाद अभी 84 के दंगे के बारे में फिल्में बनती हैं, उस पर नानावती कमीशन हो, दूसरे कमीशन हो, उस पर पॉलिटिक्स चलती है, पर महाराष्ट्र की ये सच्चाई, क्योंकि वो ब्राह्मण परिवार थे, क्योंकि वो ब्राह्मण लाइव्स आर supposedly very cheap, it doesn't even require documentation, leave alone justice. तो ये बहुत ही दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण है और एक कोशिश की, मैंने बहुत ये भी कोशिश किया कि इसके बारे में एक सेपरेट किताब भी लिखा जाए। कि मराठी में कुछ उपन्यास हैं, बहुत सारे लोगों ने उसको फिक्शनलाइज करके लिखा है, मैंने उनको ये उद्धृत किया है अपने वॉल्यूम 2 में, पर आई थॉट एक फैक्चुअल छोटा सा बुक कैन बी रिटन अबाउट इट, बट देयर वाज सो मच ऑपोजिशन टू गेट इट पब्लिश्ड कि नहीं, माय पब्लिशर आल्सो सेड ये थोड़ा एक्सटेंड कर दिया।
I think you have still done great justice to this topic in your book. I mean, as I hope so. Covering it and it was not discussed for so many years.
History gives that space for healing. कि justice न भी मिले, the insult that is added to injury is आप उसको भुला ही दें कि ऐसा हुआ ही नहीं, आप झूठ बोल रहे हैं, कब हुआ, दस्तावेज दिखाइए। अरे जब सब कुछ जल गया है तो कौन काहे का दस्तावेज होगा? जब कोई पुलिस केस दर्ज नहीं हुआ तो कहाँ दस्तावेज होंगे? और लोग अपनी सच्चाई के बारे में झूठ क्यों बोलेंगे? उनके अपने आई विटनेस अकाउंट्स हैं, उसका कुछ तो संज्ञान लीजिए। कोई नहीं कह रहा है कि दोषियों को आज सजा दी दीजिए, बट एटलीस्ट उनको अपनी बात और अपना सत्य रखने का तो मौका मिलना चाहिए। इतने सालों बाद जब परपेट्रेटर्स, विक्टिम्स सारे मर गए हैं, एटलीस्ट नाउ इतिहास का वो चौखट ही ऐसा है जो हीलिंग स्पेस है, तो उसको भी हम नकार देते हैं। चाहे वो इस्लामिक आक्रांताओं के बारे में हो, क्या क्या उन्होंने किया, और सावरकर जी ने अपने 6 ग्लोरियस एपॉक्स में लिखा ये है कि कैसे कैसे इन्वेजन हुए, उसके बारे में बात करने में क्यों हिचकिचा है? उसके बारे में बात करेंगे तो आज की जो सामाजिक समरसता है वो किसी तरह से उसको क्षति पहुंच जाएगी। ये बहुत ही कुंठित मानसिकता है जो यही कहता है कि आज के समुदाय किसी और शताब्दी में आए आक्रांता के लिए जिम्मेदार है, या आज भी ऐसे लोग हैं कई समुदायों में जो आक्रांताओं को अपना हीरो मानते हैं, जो उनको अपना आदर्श मानते हैं। और अगर देश की एकता और अखंडता को हमें बरकरार रखना है तो उनको भी बताना है कि ये लोग आपके रोल मॉडल्स और हीरो नहीं है। गजनी, घोरी, टीपू सुल्तान, औरंगजेब, ये देश के आक्रांता थे। इनके बारे में आप जाके अपने बाजार पे ये करें, उनको venerate them. I think that should stop. They were the country's villains, and the country can have only one set of heroes and villains.
And on that, I'll just add one line that we are all looking forward sometime in 24 or hopefully as early as possible your book about Tipu Sultan, because I know you're working on it and there's a lot of truth that needs to be said.
So I'm going to take a few audience questions.
Tipu Sultan se pehle there's also.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to give you one word. You should definitely talk about your most recent book, which came out very quickly.
It's not yet come out. It's in the making of as we speak. आर्कियोलॉजिकल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया ने वाराणसी के हाई कोर्ट में अपना सर्वे रिपोर्ट फाइनली दायर कर दिया। तो आज पढ़ने को आरसी क्या, पढ़े लिखे को फारसी क्या, वहाँ आप जाके देखिए वो ज्ञान, पहले तो ज्ञान वापी मस्जिद को उसका ही अर्थ समझ नहीं आता, और वहाँ जाके देखिए वेस्टर्न खंडहर जो है पूरा हिंदू शिल्प कला है, सारे खम्भों पे त्रिशूल और शंकु चक्र ये बने हुए हैं, और ऊपर तक डाल के उसको मस्जिद बोल दिया गया है। और इट्स नॉट जस्ट एनी अदर टेम्पल, वो हमारे एक वन ऑफ द 12 ज्योतिर्लिंग which is one of the most sacred spots, जैसे जेरूसलम, मक्का होता है, काशी, मथुरा, अयोध्या, ये सब बहुत हिंदू जनमानस के लिए बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है। तो विष्णु शंकर जैन जी जो वो और उनके जो पिताजी हरिशंकर जैन जो सिंगल हैंडेडली न किसी गवर्नमेंट के सपोर्ट, न किसी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के सपोर्ट, ऑलमोस्ट पिछले 30 सालों से काशी और मथुरा को लिबरेट करने के लिए जो अभियान चला रहे हैं। विष्णु जी ने मुझसे बोला कि बहुत सारे दस्तावेज हैं, आप एक इतिहासकार के नाते क्या आप इसको एक किताब के माध्यम से रख सकते हैं, इससे पहले कि मोमेंटम चला जाए। तो इसीलिए ऑलमोस्ट एग्जाम के लिए मैंने इतना पढ़ाई नहीं किया है। 12वीं पढ़ते हुए मैं रात के 3 बजे 4 बजे तक उठ के सारे जो काशी खंड में ब्रह्म वैवर्त पुराण, स्कांद पुराण, इनमें जो रेफरेंसेस हैं और बहुत सारे संस्कृत के निबंध, और महाराष्ट्र के जो ब्राह्मण परिवार थे वो काशी में जाके उन्होंने काशी के महत्व को उजागर किया था। नारायण भट्ट जो एंसेस्टर थे गागा भट्ट के, जो छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज का राज्याभिषेक उन्होंने करवाया, नारायण, और अभी राम मंदिर का जो प्राण प्रतिष्ठा भी उन्हीं के वंशज कोई कर रहे हैं। तो नारायण भट्ट ने तोडरमल की सहायता लेके अकबर के शासन के दौरान एक भव्य अष्टमंडप विश्वनाथ मंदिर बनाया था, और उसको बार बार तोड़ा गया कुतुबुद्दीन ऐबक के समय में, और रजिया सुल्तान ने वहाँ पे तोड़ करके उसको 4 साल राज किया। उसमें शी हैड ऑल द टाइम टू आल्सो गो एंड बिल्ड अ मॉस्क देयर। और फिर अलाउद्दीन खिलजी, सिकंदर लोधी, और आज डॉक्टर उदय कुलकर्णी ने मुझे बताया कि 1775 में फिर से उसको डेमोलिश किया गया। औरंगजेब ऑफ कोर्स वाज द लास्ट, सिकंदर लोधी के बाद। तो इतने सारे वेव्स ऑफ आइकोनोक्लाज्म होने के बावजूद द रेजिलियंस, दैट इज व्हाट इज इम्पोर्टेंट, कि मंदिर तोड़ो हम फिर से उसको स्थापित करेंगे, आप वहाँ तोड़ो उसके नजदीक हम डालेंगे, उसको तोड़ो उसके उस साइड पे हम करेंगे, हम बार बार एक्सेप्टेड डिफीट। सो आज भी हमारा जो नंदी जी की मूर्ति है उस तरफ मुंह करके बैठा है, 300 साल से अपने महादेव के लिए वेट कर रहे हैं नंदी जी। So I thought the title of the book should be Waiting for Shiva, unearthing the truth of Kashi.
When will this book be available for us?
February, hopefully. Insha Mahadev.
So I'll take a few questions. I don't know how we're going to get the questions from audience because I can't see with all these lights. If we can get some written questions, I'm going to take one that I've already got here, and because if we do short answers, we can cover everything. So one which I've already gotten here from Sri Bhalchandra Kuntek. Can you talk about good one? Can you talk about Savarkar's oratory skills?
I mean, he was a प्रखर वक्ता थे अपने ज़माने की, और राइट फ्रॉम चाइल्डहुड, जैसे मैंने पहले कहा था कि फर्गूसन कॉलेज में जिस तरह से उनके भाषण हुआ करते थे और लोगों को प्रोत्साहित और प्रेरित करने की जो क्षमता थी, ये अपने पावर से थी, जिस तरह से उनको convince them, bring them to your.
There's some legendary story you don't talk about it, about when he was a student and he participated in the elocution contest. Now he won
the contest, and whatever be the topic, he could always manage to win the debate. So I think that was a great talent for any political leader, whether it was him or later, whether it was Indira Gandhi, whether it was Vajpayee, now of course Modi, and all of them. I think oratory skills are the most important for a political leader.
Yes, I think, unfortunately, we don't have to be the recording, but again, the 1956 speech recording is available, so you can hear it firsthand. So let me see if I can see any hands. Quick question. If be very brief. Yeah, let's start with this. Yeah. And just a question, as short as possible.
Yeah, just two quick ones. Who was Chitragupta? Second, heard that in 1942, INA radio, Netaji Subhash Bose mentioned and thanked Savarkar, and that is that available?
No, one is not sure of the INA speech, because in my book also I mentioned that all of Subhash Chandra Bose's speeches from Tokyo, that is not 1942 but 45, 25th June 1945, I think is the date of that. But where he says Veer Savarkar is the one who enlisted when the Congress was considering all of them as mercenaries. That speech is not published. It only finds a reference in Dhananjay Veer's book. But then Raj Bihari Bose talks a lot about Savarkar's contribution. He in fact even formed the Hindu Mahasabha branch in Japan, in Tokyo, translated most of Savarkar's books into Japanese and other languages, and he was the founder of the INA. So the connections between them, and that there is, in my book I also surmise that when Savarkar and Netaji met in Mumbai, in Dadar, their house in June 1940, 6 months after that is when he goes away from India. And Balarao Savarkar, his secretary, says that was when they were discussed that don't start another civil disobedience movement, it's of no use. You go out, शत्रु दोस्त होता है, तो उसके साथ you access powers, and that is how you make your army. About Chitragupta, that is a huge controversy that led to Savarkar, who wrote it in a pseudonym, की प्रशंसा उन्होंने की, etc., which is totally unfounded, because this claim that it was him came in a much later edition brought out by the Savarkar Smarak itself. I think the fellow who wrote the prologue just got overexcited and wrote about it. But actually, if you see, it was published in 1926 in Madras, Chennai, it was Madras then, and Savarkar was in Ratnagiri at that time. And if you see, around that time, you had VVS Iyer, just before his death. He was the one who was in Pondicherry, Madras presidency in that area. And he was one of his associates. So several of the intimate details of a first person, if I am writing my own autobiography, there will be several things which are intimate, which only I know. Now most of those have been skipped in that book. So it's written by somebody else, and that is for sure. So one can surmise that probably it was VVS Iyer, because it was published in Madras presidency. There is another theory which says it was Rajagopalachari, because when Savarkar was released from Ratnagiri in 1937, there was huge reception for him in Bombay, and in his speech and in his speech which was been published in the newspaper, I think Bombay Chronicle, Rajaji says that I had written a biography of Savarkar, and what more can I tell now which I have already not conveyed in that book. So these are pointers to the fact that it was someone else, but a revolutionary certainly, who wrote from the insider's perspective of being a team member. But certainly not him, is what one can infer.
Another quick question on this side, and then we go to this side.
So could you tell us more about the relationship between Hindu Mahasabha and RSS? Specifically about Guruji Golwalkar and Savarkar. More specifically between Guruji Golwalkar and Savarkar.
I think I should just, the two organizations were very closely connected. Savarkar's elder brother Baba Rao was one of the founding members along with Dr. Hedgewar. But slowly I think RSS wanted to chart out a course of its own. That they did not want to become a youth brigade of the Hindu Mahasabha. And Hindu Mahasabha felt very proprietary about it, whether it was Dr. Munje or whether it was Savarkar himself. Whenever there is an Andolan, the Nizam Hyderabad civil resistance, he wanted the RSS to participate. All the Hindu organizations, including Arya Samaj, they gave civil resistance, there was mass imprisonment, but the RSS stayed away. And that is when, because I think Guruji Golwalkar wanted it to be a cultural organization, and also one which does not identify so much with revolutionary activities or mass movements like this, and also something that doesn't become personality centric. That is the difference between the Hindutva of Mahasabha, which was all centered around Savarkar. So as and how the leader, his fame rose and fell, the organization would fall. So when Savarkar got arrested in the Gandhi murder case and the Mahasabha just splintered away, the Mahasabha just died. But the RSS, despite so many bans, so much of calumny, so many times it has been castigated, since it was not yoked to one individual, but the philosophy is more important. After 1925, now in 2 years it will be a centenary year. It can still survive to grow. It's the largest NGO of the world. Today the President of India, the Prime Minister of India, the Vice President, not the Vice President, before all of them came from the RSS, all the ministers come from that. So it has continued to grow. So I think that was the fundamental difference. But to sum up Savarkar's angst against the RSS, I think he had told very infamously that if there is a tomb of an RSS Swayamsevak with an epitaph on it saying what are his achievements in his life, there are only 3 lines. He was born, he joined the RSS, he died. So that was but that is the beauty of the Saffron Brotherhood, as Anderson and Gamble write about. That you could differ with each other on many issues, but still you had the larger Hindutva Saffron Brotherhood. It's unlike the communists where everyone needs to think alike or Indian. You can have differences, but still Savarkar is one of their Pratha Smaraniyas, as is Gandhi. But in a Hindu Mahasabha, Gandhi can never be venerated because your leader did not like him. But in the RSS, everybody could be adopted. You could adopt a little bit of the best of all worlds and still move on. And that adaptiveness, I think, is what keeps the RSS alive and thriving in today.
Okay, question here. Yeah.
So my question is about the future. We have had currency.
To a historian, sir.
Yes, exactly. So we have all around had only one person's photo on the currency. Do you see a time coming when our currency has photos will appear on
I would love that day. I think currency, which is as important, would become more important. It's along with Savarkarji, there is also Netaji's photo, there is Bhagat Singh, there is Lala Lajpat Rai, there is Tilak, there is, to go on, all those other heroes in London, all of them deserve, and I don't know why there needs to be only one. It can be, when Indonesia can have, our Hindu deities. I don't know Ganesh ji and Lakshmi ji, which I think Kejriwal had, talked about, but I think it should open up for everything.
Like, short question, we'll take more.
Yes, I just want to thank Vikram for being the most successful first right-wing writer. We need more such writers from right-wing.
Not a right-wing or a left-wing.
No, I can tell you that. But my question is, what is for young story writers as well, what's your way to write a history? Facts or to interview the people and then document it? How do you like if you get something from book, facts, and you get some different perspective from people's point of view?
What's your methodology?
So I think the Indic perspective to this is Itihasa is in Sanskrit it translates to it does happen. As simple our ancestors knew what Itihasa needs to be. Whatever happened, say it the way it was. Don't add your interpretations, your ideological color to it. And that is why I would not think I'm right wing or left wing. There's a nationalistic wing. Whether it was V.K. Rajwani, whether it was Jadunath Sarkar, Bhandarkar, whether it was R.C. Majumdar, all these were nationalist historians. The nationalist historiography is a very important thing which has been completely sidelined by the Marxist historiography, particularly after independence. So it's important to gather multiple sources, say things as they are, but there is no one truth. There will be multiple options. So in historiographical research terms, it's called triangulation of facts, to compare multiple views. Dr. Kulkarni is sitting here and his wonderful series on the Peshwas. I think if one has not read, it should be something that should be there in every home, because you had the Peshwa Daftar records, you had the Aitihasik Lake Sangrah of Khare and so many others, but these were not accessed. But at the same time, you have from a Tipu book, I'm seeing that there is a Maratha version of it. There is a French version of the same. There is a British version of the same. There is a Kannada version. There is a Vodiyar version. Now, sitting in 2022-23, whose you take as the ultimate truth? Everyone is going to glorify their master. So the truth lies in the middle of something which is there. At the cost of repetition, I say I usually liken history and history writing to this poem that we read as children, The Blind Man and the Elephant. And the elephant in the room literally here is history. Where all the blind men were asked to say, how does the elephant look? They touched different parts of the elephant. One said it looks like the ear, one says like the tusk, one says like the broad body. They were all correct, but they were all wrong. It was the sum of the parts. So I think this triangulation and this objectivity to the extent possible. There are biases that come even on the modern historian, which naturally crop up. To keep that out to the extent possible, that I think becomes itihasa, or it does happen.
Yes, extremely well put. I think both you and I think Dr. Kulkarni, who's sitting here, has done a great job of writing very good fact-based, well-researched history without adding a color of your own perspective to it, as was being done, as was being done past. I have a quick question for our organizers. We can go on and on, so please tell me when to stop 2 minutes before, so I'll wrap up. Until that time, I'm going to take one quick question in the front row. Sri Soni, please. Can you shout, or we can hear you? Yeah, please. Okay, so we will come here after this. The lady here after, yeah.
Dr. Sampath, first, congratulations from my heart on behalf of everybody for a major contribution you made to history, factual history, objectively stated. And my question is, when can we expect to have in our hands a book on Sri Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj?
I hope soon, sir. But along with that, I must mention here that very recently I've established something called a Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, where we'd like to. I mean, I'm limited by my capacity. I'm one individual. In 2 years, it takes 2-3 years to write one book. The only answer to historical distortion is scholarship. Nothing else. You have to inundate it with the alternative version which has been suppressed. So scout for new talents who are there in different parts of the country, fund them, give fellowships to ensure that new research comes. In every conclave, Romia Thapar did this, Irfan Habib did this, people keep just criticizing them. But where is the counter? I mean, her book is still the most authoritative one on ancient India. His is one of the most on medieval India, and that is read in universities, it is read for the UPSC selection. Where is the alternative version of our ancient Indian history? That can't happen on Twitter. Twitter wars and all of that is very transient. 2 days later, there will be a new controversy that social media will come. So scholarship and scholarship alone, every year is 10 books, new books of this kind, which go to the primary sources. What do the primary sources say? Can we decode the texts which were written in Sanskrit or Prakrit, Pali, Tamil, all the classical languages, Persian, Arabic, and reclaim our history told just as what Savarkar did perhaps while he was in London. Use the British records to write Indian history from an Indic perspective, and that is not revisionism, because revisionism or rewriting, re-evaluating is inherent to the discipline of history. It is not static. It is a continuous. Everything about the past is already known. Then historians like Dr. Kulkarni and me will be out of job because everything is known. What do we write? Already what is written. So we are all re-evaluating, rewriting based on new facts, new documents that emerged. And I think so that the government also doesn't take historical research and writing seriously. Individuals don't take it too seriously. We crib and crib about it on social media, but there has to be some kind of a cogent movement, a people's movement, to ensure that this is not a subject which our children just cram in exams, mug it up, vomit it, and then get some marks. This is an important, as we grow up, we realize that this is the mirror in which we can identify ourselves. It gives us a sense of identity as a nation, as a people, as a civilization. And so we need to very vociferously also mention to the powers that be that we will not rest till all these distorted versions continue to be taught to our children and grandchildren and successive generations.
So we are almost out of time. I would like to last question from this lady. Please.
Good evening. I happen to be the great granddaughter of Dr. B.M. Bhatt, who was a cousin of Dr. B.S. Savarkar. And so I really want to thank you for giving the tribute, whatever was not given for so many years. My great grandfather was also, like you said, could you say a few words on inspiring us? We are a second generation, but you were the one who wrote a book on this thing. So some words of inspiration from our side, so we could also, contribute something like this, like what you have done. Thank you.
No, I think there are so many. There are oral histories, family histories. Like I discovered during the riot story. I think each of you, there is so many archival documents within your families. I'm sure there are diaries. There's something else, some memoir someone has written. So these things should be brought out. and I think it should be circulated a lot more. And of course, to the user, I think the day you write, I don't know when that happens about Chhatrapati Shivaji. Already, I almost have an honorary citizenship in Maharashtra. Then maybe I might get
I was going to say, you are already a citizen of Pune as far as we are concerned.
Yes, so I'm sure there'll be something more than that will come up the day that happens. But also a lot of landmines. So a lot of good well-wishers have told me to tread carefully. But then what is history which is not going to, historian who is not stepping on a landmine? Everything today, you make a movie about a historical character, you write a book about a historical character, everything leads to controversies. In a country that doesn't care about its history, we allow monuments to fall. We don't preserve it, but we are so sensitive about how these characters are portrayed. And in the process, I think we do a lot of disservice to the legacy of these people. The day an objective biography of, say, Dr. Ambedkar or E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, whom I will not call by the other name that he is honored with, all these things can come out without fear or favor, or what Arun Shourie faced when he wrote worshipping false gods. I think that day we would have matured as a democracy that we can take alternative views.
So last question here that just came up is, Savarkar, we talk about all his greatness, but he got a lot of his views after his death, especially I would say recently. But why didn't he get as much support as he should have when he was alive?
I think because he went against the tide, both in his social movements. I think he was a nihilist who wanted to break the structures. Gandhi understood, how this India operates. Yeah, do incremental change. Don't shake up the entire thing. Use a little bit of religion, have bhajans, have all of that, and we go for a saintly image. We naturally fall for someone who's saying, the cow is not worship worthy. It's just a useful animal. People don't take it so seriously. In fact, I think in Pune it was this program where some of the Marxists who actually used to call him comrade. So whether it was M.N. Roy and all these other people there was no acrimony like the way it is today. They used to, in one of the programs they said, we like the Savarkar pre-Kala Pani, the revolutionary Savarkar. We do not accept the Savarkar after that. So, and this was already, I think, in the 1950s or something, and he's supposed to have said that to come to this stage to say that you like me before that, it took you 50 years. Now I'm sure it's going to take another 100 years for you to say that you like me post Kalapani. So now slowly the acceptance at least is coming to say you're a Hindutvavadi is not a buzzword. You can own that word very, very proudly. You can say I'm a proud Hindu. That doesn't mean I'm encroaching about somebody's space. It had almost become treacherous to the nation by appeasement and bringing the country to the brink of partition. So going against the mainstream, and once he was implicated falsely in the Gandhi murder case, which though he is absolved from it by so many, including 2018 when Mr. Pankaj Patnis, Dr. Patnis, had this PIL and so on. The Supreme Court had an amicus curiae which went through all the records. The Kapoor Commission, which is cited, that too has a very warped view. All through it says Savarkarites were involved in the murder, which is a true fact. I mean, Aapte would say was Savarkarite faction within the Hindu Mahasabha, but did that actually translate to him directly being involved? Was not there. So despite all this, that albatross is always put around his neck. So these also led to the fact that he became, as I said, a persona non grata. Talking about him would cost you your livelihood. And certainly a Penguin Random House India would not have published a biography of his maybe 30 years ago. So अच्छे दिन तो आ गए.
That's a great point to end on. I'm not going to summarize it. This can go on for hours. All I'll say is 2 points. One is Vikram is going to do book signing right inside that hall, so you can catch him after this event and get your copies signed of both volumes and I think some of the other books as well. And I'm going to make one personal request that I've made to him, and he has accepted it few years back, but I need to revise it, which is along with Chhatrapati Shivaji and Tipu Sultan and all the books, I've been pushing him that someday he will write a biography of Lokmanya Tilak as well, because we need that. Once again, thank you very much. Vikram, it was great. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you all.
Thank you.
व्हिडिओ आवडला असेल तर लाईक करा, शेअर करा, चॅनलला सबस्क्राईब करा. अशाच नवनवीन व्हिडिओंच्या अपडेट्ससाठी बेल आयकॉनला क्लिक करा. आमच्या फेसबुक आणि इंस्टाग्राम पेजला फॉलो करायला विसरू नका.